Hello everybody, video here for you today. This is the retro no cap recap of the Curse of Oak Island season 7 episode 7 called Things That Go Bump Out. Originally aired December 17th, 2019. If you missed any of my recaps of previous and future episodes, there's a link to my Oak Island playlist in the upper right. Let's get into it. Previously, on the Curse of Oak Island, people have been looking for an incredible treasure for 229 years. A new crane pad for an even bigger crane has been built towards the east in Smith's Cove so that the crane can remove part of the sheet piling dam to build a bump out, which will allow drainage and excavation of the slipway area 50 feet further out into the bay. There's no documented previous searcher activity in the newly accessible area. Rick meets Doug and Steve in the research center. 1 week prior, the team found the 1863 built Shaft 9, documented as having been constructed 100 feet southwest of the original money pit location in an attempt to bypass the flood tunnels. Since then, the money pit's exact location has been lost due to time and the destruction of the money pit area with so many digs. Based on the Shaft 9 location, Steve has plotted an arc 100 feet away in pink to represent the possible locations of the original money pit shaft. This image is zoomed in. Shaft 9 is to the right past these small markings just outside of the grid. Thinking of finding other landmarks to help pinpoint the original shaft's location, Doug found this 1931 photo from the Mel Chapel exploration, and he points out 2 areas of disturbed earth. His twice bandaged index finger is pointing at the Shaft 9 location, and he believes the area his thumb is near to be Shaft 2. In 1805, Shaft 2 was dug 14 feet away from the original money pit shaft after it flooded a year earlier, once the 90-foot depth was reached and the 90-foot stone was removed. Shaft 2 reached 110 feet without encountering water. The Onslow Company then tunneled towards the original shaft, but it caved in and flooded 2 feet from reaching that target. The Onslow Company went bankrupt shortly afterwards, ending that search for the 3 men that originally discovered the money pit. Doug suggests a drilling program to try to find Shaft 2 because knowing the locations of both Shaft 9 and Shaft 2 would put an X on the map for the original shaft. That afternoon, Craig and Steve pick a spot for drilling using GPS coordinates of Shaft 9 as well as the 1931 photo. The spot chosen is right outside of the Women's Memorial / Garden Shaft, which becomes a hot spot in later seasons. Choice Drilling gets to work. Meanwhile, Rick and other members of the team travel 52 miles northeast of Oak Island to a museum in Dartmouth. They're following up on a tip Rick got at Dan Blankenship's funeral from a man that said he was told many years prior that a stone in the yard there was the carved stone from Oak Island. Gary and Jack arrive on Lot 6, continuing metal detection of the western part of the island after several recent finds. Concentrating on the shore of Lot 6, they first find is a modern nail, but the next up are these 2 nails that Gary says would be the type of thing you would find in a 1700s shipwreck. Next is this larger cribbing spike, again Gary dated as 1700s easy. Gary says that the size of it indicates that it would have been in a substantial structure like a wharf. Having arrived at the museum in Dartmouth, Rick and other members of the team are told by Kevin Rideout that he was informed that the carved stone from Oak Island was on the left side of the rhododendron, which has grown significantly in the 40 years since. There is no record of the stone because it was not a museum at the time. It was the estate of a previous searcher's family, and interestingly, the bookbinding shop that was supposed to have had the 90-foot stone on display went out of business that same year the family bought the house in 1919. Rick feels the soil on the left side, and there is no indication of any stones. They will get a government permit for an excavation and return. Back on Oak Island the next day, the framework is in place in the Smith's Cove bump out. After draining and or low tide, Mike Jardine of Irving Equipment noticed, even without any excavation, that there is a structure that has horizontal and vertical beams in the bump out area. He described it as very different looking from the slipway that was found right behind it, more inland. He says the slipway would seem to end right here, but just inside of it is what Mike thinks is a shaft. Rick later says it's very interesting because it's 10 feet below the water at high tide. Personal research indicates that it was around 5 feet high 200 to 300 years ago, which would still be very interesting as a shaft location unless it's for a flood tunnel. Perhaps they got the wood carbon dated. Stay tuned. The sonic drilling is at 15 feet in the search for the original searcher shaft 2, and the core from that level reveals disturbed earth, which means it has been dug before. The next core contains small pieces of wood. The one after that contains multiple pieces of vertically stacked wood, which would indicate a shaft. The plan now is to locate the other 3 walls of it. The bump out is complete, and Mike says they are pulling up one of the pieces of sheet piling to let water out, and then at low tide they will replace it to reduce the pumping that will be needed to be done. The next day, the bump out is as dry as it's going to get, and they take a closer look at the structure. Archaeologist Laird Niven says he has no idea why it's here and no idea what it would be. His plan is to profile it by having Billy use the excavator around the edges of it. Billy uncovers a side of it which reveals this tar paper. Rick examines further and finds that it is throughout the structure. Tar paper was widely used in construction in the 1800s, which would likely mean it's a searcher structure. But there's also stacked cobblestone similar to a flood tunnel. There's no documented searcher structure in this area. Billy suggests it's part of the flood tunnel system, and indeed there's a lot of water coming out from under the structure. The plan is to keep uncovering it to see if it leads back to the money pit area. I'll be continuing retro no-cap recaps of season 7 and 8 during the fall. All of the other episodes are already done and are in my Oak Island playlist. If they did continue the recent pattern, season 12 of The Curse of Oak Island will begin airing in early November 2024. I'm also doing retro no-cap recaps of the seasons 2 through 4 of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. Seasons 1 and 5 are all done and are in the Skinwalker Ranch playlist. Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe, like, and comment. Sempre avanti.